Hello everyone, welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is the channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. In today's video we're going to be talking about the individual units of the Deathrattle army. We're going to start with the most common soldiers in the Deathrattle army, that of course being the Skeleton Warriors. Skeletons form the mainstay of Deathrattle armies and have the ability to go head to head against other enemy infantry. These skeletons are warriors raised from times long ago, having been slain in combat and buried with both their weapons and armour still intact. Although these warriors bear rusted swords and rotten wooden shields, these skeletons still have a flicker of light within their sockets, and that indicates their spirits still linger within them, whose souls still remain trapped within the material realm. Now, looking at their rules in the game, they have a 4-inch move, they have a 6+ save, bravery 10, and 1 wound. You can give them 2 types of weapons, so each unit can be equipped with an ancient blade, which is the sword, which you have range 1, 1 attack, force to hit, force to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. The alternative weapon you can give them is the ancient spear, which is range 2 inches, 1 attack, fires to hit, force to wound, no rend again, and 1 damage. Now, each unit can have a skeleton champion, which is essentially the leader of the unit. He just simply makes an extra attack. You can also have an icon bearer, which I strongly suggest you do it. I mean, you have to do this if you're doing a death army, otherwise you're doing yourself a disservice, because it's one of the best banners in the game. I think it is the best. So, the icon and standard bearer. Models in this unit may be icon bearers or standard bearers. I strongly suggest you have more than one of these in this unit because it is the most valuable model you will have in this unit, believe me. So you can return D6 slain models to this unit in your hero phase if it includes any icon or standard bearers. The reason I say to have more than one is because, yes, in Age of Sigmar you can determine where the damage goes on each model, so you can take the models off when they die in the order that you choose. So logically always leave the icon and standard bearer to the end because it's the most valuable model in that unit. However, there are a few enemy models out there that can individually pick your models to be slain, such as a giant or something even more nasty as a star drake, and I've played against many of these models and it is very annoying when they eat your 1 standard bearer in a unit of 40 models and now none of them can come back. Okay, so the next special model we have is the Hornblower. Models in this unit may be Hornblowers. A unit that includes any Hornblowers can always move up to 6 inches when it charges, unless its charge roll is higher. Again, with this it says you can have as many of these models as you want in this unit, so I do suggest having more than one. To be honest, as you'll be building up your unit from boxes of 10 skeletons, you're bound to make one of these models for every 10. So that gives you 4 Hornblowers in the unit if you have a unit of 40 and 4 standard bearers. You can only have 1 skeleton champion though, because logically he is the champion of the unit, i.e. there wouldn't be more than one of him, otherwise it wouldn't make much sense. Okay, so the abilities of the Skeleton Warriors. So, serve in death. You can add 1 to hit rolls for units of Skeleton Warriors that are within 18 inches of a death hero from your army. So, this is more than likely always going to be in effect as you try and keep your army quite close to each other, all the separate units, because they do sort of synergize with each other. So a death hero being nearby, so that's anything with the death and hero keyword within 18 inches of this unit will give them +1 to hit, which means your skeletons, if you give them the spears for the extra range, they're no longer hitting on 5s, they're hitting on 4s, which mathematically and to be honest it just sounds a lot better. Okay, so after that we have the Skeleton Legion, and this is the reason why you want to take as many of these models into a unit that you can. So the Skeleton Legion. Models in this unit make 1 extra attack with their melee weapons if their unit has 20 or more models. They make 2 extra attacks instead if their unit has 30 or more models. Okay, so that is as good as it sounds. So here you are, have a basic infantry unit that D6 models can return every one of your hero phase. and for having more than the standard amount, which is 10 essentially. So if you have 20 more, you get an extra attack, but if you have 30 more, you get 2 extra attacks, which is huge. And this is why you want to take 40 in a unit. So if you have a unit of 40, and by the time they get to the enemy, they're probably going to get shot to pieces, but if they have had the disadvantage of being shot at while marching across the battlefield, even if they lose 10 models and they're down to 30, they're still making those 2 extra attacks. And with you bringing back D6 in each of your hero phase, you are more than likely going to retain them at 30, or maybe, if you're lucky, bring them back up to 40 again. Okay, so that is their best ability, but moving on. The Crypt Shield. You can add 1 to save rolls for units carrying Crypt Shields against attacks that have a rend of dash. Now, this will come up more often than you think. So, these Skeleton Warriors, they are great at killing essentially either infantry or horde units. They're not great elite killers. Yes, the weight of their attacks can bring down big scary monsters, but using these right, it's best to crash them against the enemy's front line. So, the enemy's front line is bound to be quite a basic unit as well, so that means that they will have a rend of dash, which just means they don't have any rend at all. So with that, they no longer have a 6-up save, they now have a 5-up save, which makes a huge difference, and especially how I've already mentioned about them coming back to life, they can be really, really, really durable. Okay, and then finally, talking about magic, and this is saying that Death Wizards know the Raised Skeleton spell in addition to any other spells they know. So yes, Skeleton Warriors, like many death units out there, can be summoned in, and as Skeleton Warriors are a fairly basic death unit, to summon them in, it's not that hard, and this can be great for summoning them in onto an objective, as they are quite slow models. Instead of you having to move the objective, you could just go bang, turn 1. If you have a powerful death wizard in your army, you can just go bang, turn 1, takes that objective, a block of 40 skeletons on it. The enemy's going to have to spend the whole game trying to shift them on that while you're clocking points. Okay, so the Raised Skeletons spell. Raised Skeletons has a casting value of 5. If successfully cast, you can set up a unit of up to 10 Skeleton Warriors within 18 inches of the caster and more than 9 inches away from the enemy models and units. The unit is added to your army but cannot move in the following movement phase. If the casting roll was 10 or more, set up a unit of 20 Skeleton Warriors instead. So you're suddenly going from a unit of 10 to a unit of 20. There are ways, well I say there are ways, there's a certain model who happens to be called Nagash, the Supreme Lord of the Undead, who can, instead of setting up 20 if he's lucky, he can set up 40, which is sounds quite ridiculous, and in game can change the shape of the game, and your opponent can be shocked or surprised, and then furious. He's going to spend the rest of the game killing very basic models that keep on coming back. So that is the Skeleton Warriors. In my opinion, they're probably my favourite battle line unit out there in the game, as they are battle line like most of the Deathrattle units. If you just stick to Deathrattle, with Skeleton Warriors, they're a little bit different. They are just generally battle line for any Death army. And like I was saying, they're my favourite battle line because they have the potential to do insane amount of damage to the enemy, particularly if they don't have very good saves. And they are super durable. A lot of the time they're going to be getting +1 to their saves for their Crypt Shields, and also bringing D6 models back every single turn in your hero phase is just insanely good and should not be overlooked. That is the best part of this unit, I would say, is being able to bring back those models. Also, them having a standard 6+ save, it doesn't sound that amazing, but like I said, with the Crypt Shield, a lot of the time they'll be getting a 5+ save, and because they have a save, you can modify it. So if you chuck a Mystic Shield on them, then it becomes a 4+ save. And having a unit like that with a 4+ save makes them super hard to get killed off and will serve you well as your battle line. Now the Skeleton Warrior's done, we move on to the Grave Guard, which are the elite choice of troops for the Deathrattle army. Grave Guard are, unlike simple Skeleton Warriors, heroes and powerful warriors from a long and ancient past, equipped with some of the finest weapons and armour of their age. These undead still have the combat abilities of their former lives still within them, allowing them to become a formidable corpse of a warrior, their enchanted blades cutting down the toughest of enemies. Now, looking at the rules in game, you can tell just off the bat that they are better than the average Skeleton Warrior. So, they've got a movement of 4 inches, which is standard. They've got a save of 5+, they've got bravery 10, and they've got 1 wound each. They've got 2 choices of weapon you can give the unit. First one is white blades, so that's 1 inch range, 2 attacks, freeze to hit, force to wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. The other one is great white blades, which is again range 1, 2 attacks again, freeze to hit, but this time it's freeze to wound, of -1 rend and 1 damage. So, a unit of Grave Guard has 5 or more models. Some units of Grave Guard are equipped with white blades and a crypt shield, others instead with 2-handed great white blades like we just talked about. Okay, here we go again with a standard bearer. This one does the same thing, but is slightly weaker as it is for a more elite unit. So, models in this unit may be standard bearers. Again, always take more than 1. You can return D3 slain models to this unit in your hero phase if it includes any standard bearers. So very similar to the Skeleton one, the Skeleton Warriors. It's not D6, it's D3, but as we're going to go through their abilities and their standard stats, they are generically better than the average Skeleton Warrior, so fair enough that you're not getting as many back. But D3, elite infantry, most other armies would kill for that. Okay, next we have the Sensual? Okay, I probably can't pronounce that word, so I'm just going to call him the Champion. So the leader of this unit is the Champion. A Champion makes 3 attacks rather than 2. So, again, very similar to the Skeleton Warrior Champion, making an extra attack. Simple, but can be effective and can make the difference of you wiping out a unit or not. Okay, next up we have the Hornblower, which is the same as the Skeletal unit one. For the Warriors, I'll just go over it again though. Models in this unit may be Hornblowers, so again, you can take more than 1, do take more than 1. A unit that includes any Hornblowers can always move up to 6 inches when it charges unless its charge roll is higher. I don't know if I mentioned this much when we talked about the Skeleton Warriors, but being able to automatically charge 6 inches is huge because there's so many times in the game where of course you have to be 3 inches away from an enemy unit to be able to charge it because that's the closest you can move to it. So the charge, you roll 2 dice, add the results together, that's how many inches you can charge. So if you get a double 1, you can only charge 2 inches, and like I say, you have to be 3 inches away, so you failed your charge. So being able to charge automatically 6 inches means that there's none of this, risk to it if I get a double 1. Even if you're 5 inches away, you're guaranteed that charge, and especially of how slow skeletons are. When I say skeletons, I mean all the skeletons and Deathrattle units. They only have a movement of 4 inches, so being able to automatically charge 6 inches is huge. So that's always a great help. Okay, their abilities. So cursed weapons. If the wound roll for a model from this unit is a 6 or more, that attack inflicts double damage. Okay, so that's very nice. So they're each making 2 attacks each, and if you get a 6 or more to wound, because it can be modified, instead of making 1 damage, it's going to make 2 damage, which will, well, goes without saying, it will kill 2 normal infantry guys with just 1 wound, but it can also take out something like a Stormcast Liberator, who has 2 wounds, or Khorne Bloodbound Blood Warrior, so much more meatier units, which are double in size. Okay, so the next one is Crypt Shield. So this is the same as the Skeleton Warriors, so you can add 1 to save rolls for this unit carrying Crypt Shields against attacks with a rend of dash, so a rend of none, which is still good. It's very constant, and like I say, these guys, they might be going up against more elite things which do have rend, so they might not get it as much, but if they do get it, their 5-up save now becomes a 4-up save, which is very good. And like the Skeleton Warriors, if you wanted to put a Mystic Shield on them, they would then have a 3-up save, which is insanely good for a unit that, like I mentioned before, D3 models will come back in your hero phase. So having a very durable unit which can do a lot of damage, because it does have a -1 rend, has 2 attacks each, and has the potential to do double damage for each model in the unit. Now, unlike Skeleton Warriors, there's no initial benefits for taking lots of them in one unit. Like Skeleton Warriors, if you took 30 or more, they would make 3 attacks each instead of 1. With Graveguard, it's just a constant 2 attacks, but the more you have in the unit, the more going to be obviously attacking in that unit, so the more damage they can inflict. So with these, I would say run them in 10 minimum, 15 or 20. Okay, so on to magic again. So very much again like the Skeleton Warriors, and to be honest, a lot of units in Death, so they can be summoned. So to summon them, you need to be a Death Wizard, so you need to have the Death and Wizard keyword. Okay, so to raise Graveguard, has a casting value of 5, and magic, just in case if you don't know how it works, you roll 2 dice and you plus the results together, and if that's higher than the casting value, voila, you get your spell off. So if successfully casting, set up a unit of up to 5 Graveguard within 18 inches of the caster and 9 inches away from the enemy. So 5 Graveguard, so yeah, that's okay, but they'll probably, if any enemy units dedicated to wipe them out, they will get wiped out. However, if the casting roll was a 10 or more, you can now set up a unit of up to 10 Graveguard instead. Now that is much better, and like I said, you want to take these in units of 10 to 15. So to be able to summon 10 of them onto the board, admittedly trying to get a casting roll of 10 or more is quite hard, but there are ways and means to buff your casting, which we will talk about in a later video. So that's a Graveguard. I think they are a very nice elite unit, especially for the Deathrattle, which is quite a small army. They had a nice bit of options to them to be able to deal with the elite units that I said the Skeleton Warriors can't, because they've got that rend, they can punch through that armour. So that's them. And in a Deathrattle army, they are battle line, so they fill out one of your slots for that. Okay, now it's time to look at the Black Knights, which are the cavalry option for Deathrattle. Black Knights come from a time many centuries ago. Upon their death, they were buried with their most prized possessions, their blade, their armour, and their steed. However, without the blessing of Sigmar, these corpses are susceptible to the corrupting influence of a necromancer. Many centuries afterwards, it is common for necromancers to raise these unblessed corpses from their grave to do his bidding as his most elite warriors. Now, in game, Black Knights, being the only cavalry available to Deathrattle, do add a nice flavour to the army, as they have an exception to their incredibly slow movement. Instead, Black Knights move 12 inches. They have a 5-up save, bravery 10, and 2 wounds, a model. Okay, they have 2 weapons, which is, the first one is the Barrow Lance, which is range 1 inch, 1 attack, hits on a 4, wounds on a 4, no rend, and 1 damage. The other attack, the Skeletal Steed's Hoofs and Teeths, 1 inch range, 2 attacks, 4's to hit, 5's to wound, no rend, 1 damage. You do get both of these attacks, of course, because the Barrow Lance is the rider on top, and the Skeletal Steed's Hoofs and Teeths are the Skeletal Steeds. Okay, so the description of the unit. A unit of Black Knights has 5 or more models. Black Knights are armed with rusted Barrow Lances and carry crypt shields. They ride skeletal steeds that lash out at their enemies with their hooves and teeths. Okay, so first off, you have the Hell Knight. The leader of this unit is a Hell Knight. A Hell Knight makes 2 attacks with its Barrow Lance instead of 1. So like we've seen with the Skeleton Warriors and the Graveguard, the leader of the unit makes 1 extra attack. Like I say, it's simple, but it's effective. The Standard Bearer. We love the Standard Bearer. So models in this unit may be Standard Bearers, always take more than 1. you can return D3 slain models to this unit in your hero phase if it includes any standard bearers. So, the same as the Graveguard standard bearer, so you get D3 slain models, but unlike the Graveguard, where you're bringing D3 1 wound models back, you're bringing D3 2 wound models back, which means in your hero phase you could essentially bring 6 wounds back into this unit, which is incredibly is a fantastic way to make your opponent be really annoyed with you and never want to play against this unit again. On the other side, for you, it's fantastic because you have a cavalry unit here that you can just send off, try and charge the enemy turn 1 with this unit. If you manage to, you can bog down the front line of the enemy, and especially if you have a big unit of Black Knights, it's going to be incredibly hard for the enemy to try and wipe them out, which is fantastic. So while you're tying them down, all your units are moving onto the objectives, capture what you need to, positioning your units where they need to go to deal with the enemy army. By the time the Black Knights have been slain, you will be all ready for your approaching enemy. Okay, so that's the standard bearer again. The next unit, the Hornblower, again it's the same as Skeleton Warriors and the Graveguard, where you automatically get to charge 6 inches, which again, like I explained, the Graveguard is fantastic because it means that you're always guaranteed a charge if you're within 6 inches of the enemy. Okay, their abilities. The Deathly Charge, add 1 to wound rolls and damage for this unit's barrel lances if it charged in the same turn. Which, yeah, it is good because then it means the barrel lance is now hitting on a 4 and then wounding on a 3, and then instead of damage of 1, it's damage 2. It is good, but in all honesty, Black Knights, they're not heavy combat killers. You know, you might, especially with their charge ability, you might think they're good, you know, on paper and they can do a lot of damage. All I'm saying is use them to bog down the enemy because of how quick their speed is, how quickly they can get to the enemy. Bog them down with these Black Knights, and then if you manage to do some damage on the charge, it's a bonus. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've charged this unit into a basic infantry unit the enemy had. I think it was Dwarf Warriors, and a unit of 10 Black Knights managed to slaughter, I think I killed probably about 13, 15 Dwarf Warriors, and yeah, it was fantastic. It's the best I've ever done. But do not get hooked up thinking that these guys are your damage dealers. They're not. For Deathrattle, you want to have your Graveguard as that hammer. These are much more of an anvil, just a very fast one. Okay, so moving on to their Crypt Shields. So you can add 1 to save rolls to this unit against attacks that have a rend of dash, meaning none. So it's the same shield we've seen for the other 2 units we've looked at. Yes, it is very good. It is, of course, situational, depends what you're going up against. But if you charge this into the basic front line of the enemy, this unit, having the +1 to your save, because they're unlikely going to have rend, makes them more durable. And like I've been saying, you want these guys to be durable. They're not your damage dealers, they're just there to be a pain in your enemy's arse. Okay, so after that you have magic. So again, Death Wizards know how to summon Black Knights. So they're very much the same. I think they are exactly the same as Graveguard in terms of summoning. So let's have a look. Raise Black Knights. Raise Black Knights has a casting value of 5. If successfully cast, you can set up a unit of up to 5 Black Knights within 18 inches of the caster and more than 9 inches away from the enemy. The unit is added to your army, but cannot move in the following movement phase. If the casting roll was 10 or more, set up a unit of up to 10 Black Knights instead. So yeah, it's the same as summoning Graveguard. Now, units of 10 of these are probably more worthwhile than units of 5. Unlike Graveguard though, a unit of 5 Black Knights is, instead of it being 5 wounds, it's 10 wounds because they've got 2 wounds per model. It is worth taking because it is a fast unit. If you need to get it from A to B in a couple of turns, they can do that, whereas your other units in your Deathrattle can't. The unit of 5 can still bog down the enemy a bit because if you charge them into a fairly weak thing the enemy has, just to tie it into place. D3 of these models will be coming back in your hero phase, so if the enemy doesn't have the capability to wipe them out in one turn, again, these can cause a great deal of pain to your enemy and just be a nuisance, really. Okay, next up is the last unit and the leader of these great armies, that being the White Kings. They were once ancient and immensely powerful human warlords that have once occupied the lands of present-day Siesh. When imbued with dark magic, these ancient warlords rise from their crypts as White Kings. Eyes glowing with unnatural life, the merest touch of their blade can drain the life from their foes, or slice through flesh and bone with effortless ease. Clad in heavy armour, their bodies are virtually invulnerable to damage. Okay, in game, there are two different types of White Kings, and we're going to look at the more aggressive combat orientated one first, that being the White King with Black Axe. Okay, so he has a 4-inch movement, which is standard for the Deathrattle. He has a 4+ save, which is nice, and he has a bravery of 10 and 5 wounds. Okay, so his attacks. He only has one weapon, but he's got a range of 1, has 3 attacks, has a 3 to hit, and you need a 3 to wound with -1 rend, D3 damage. Okay, the description. A White King is a single model armed with a black axe and wearing a heavy suit or barrow armour. Okay, so abilities. The Black Axe. Roll a dice at the end of the combat for each enemy model that this White King has wounded but did not slay. If the result is greater than the number of wounds the model has remaining, it is slain. Okay, so instantly the first thing that's popping up in my head is that this guy can, if he's lucky in combat, instantly kill monsters. But it's not as simple as that. There are a few you have to sort of try and... He needs to be supported to be able to do this, to take down the big scary monsters. But for him to be able to take down enemy heroes, he is fantastic. He is by far the best anti-hero for the Deathrattle army, because most heroes have 5 wounds, like the White King himself. But this guy, so he's got 3 attacks, each doing D3 damage. So let's say he gets the worst side of average through. So let's say he gets only 1 of his attacks through. He does D3 damage, the average of that is a 2. So he's done 2 damage to a 3 wound model. And then now, at the end of the combat phase, you roll a dice. And if like we said, the enemy hero only has 3 wounds left, you have to roll a dice and get 4 or more, which is a 50-50 chance. So him being able to go in there and, not all the time, but a lot of the time being able to take down many other 5 wound enemy heroes is not a bad little ability to have. Okay, so his next ability, the Burrow Armour. These ancient suits of armour are magically enhanced to turn aside the most grievous of attacks, so half any wounds or mortal wounds inflicted onto this White King, rounding fractions up. Okay, so he halves the majority of damage. To be honest, he halves all damage, but the rounding fractions up, so if an enemy does a 2 damage attack to him, he will only take 1 damage. If they do a series of 1 damage attacks to him, he will half that as well. But if the enemy does 3 damage to him, you half it, which is obviously 1.5, but you have to round it up. So if he takes 3 damage, he halves it, but it becomes a 2. So his Black Axe allows him to slay most characters out there. His armour allows him to half damage, so he's looking pretty good so far. And then his command ability. So it's Lord of Bones. If a White King uses this ability, pick 1 Deathrattle unit within 18 inches. All models in that unit make 1 extra attack for each of their weapons until your next hero phase. Okay, so pick 1 of your units within 18 inches as long as it's Deathrattle, and then make an extra attack. Now, that is good in itself, but when you stack it with other things, like a simple thing, for example, if I was talking about the Grave Guard, yes, they don't get more attacks for having bigger and bigger unit sizes. But with this, instead of making 2 attacks each, now they're making 3 attacks each, and they have a chance to do double damage. So that's the Graveguard. But the best thing to put these on, by far, is the Skeleton Warriors, because if you have, like I've said before, if you have 30 or more in a unit, but you're going to have 40, aren't you, to make sure you get to have that ability for as long as possible, they make 3 attacks each. Now, if you put this command ability on them, they make 4 attacks each, which is incredibly good. Again, I can't get over how good the Skeleton Warriors are, really, especially with buff for things like this, because 4 attacks each for each model. And if you're taking spears, which I strongly suggest you do take spears, because they are the best weapon loadout for that unit, to give it the extra range, so more Skeleton Warriors can attack. So, skeleton unit with spears gives them range 2 inches, so that means 2 ranks of them can attack. So let's say you've got a very simple 10 in your first rank and then 10 in the rank behind. Each skeleton is making 4 attacks, so the 10 in the first rank are making 40 attacks, and then the 10 behind are making 40 attacks again. So from just having 20 skeletons in range, you're making 80 attacks. Now, they might not have any rend, and might only do 1 damage each, but 80 attacks from 20 models is unbelievably good, especially for how cheap Skeleton Warriors are. And what I've noticed when I take them to battle a lot is the enemy does not see this coming. They look at the Skeleton Warriors and they think that's a basic unit, it's just a tough unit to kill, you know, he's probably going to bring some model backs. And like you do bring models back in that unit. But they don't realise how offensive they can be. And oh my god, the offensive ability with them, stacked with this command ability, giving them 4 attacks each per model, is lovely. Okay, so that was the more combat orientated one. Now it's time to look at the more supportive White King. Not as good in combat and not as good as taking damage, but he adds more to your army as a whole and synergizes with it a bit better. And here's of course the White King with a baleful tomb blade. Now he's got the same little spindly wheel stats as the other White King, so he's got a 4-inch move, a 4+ save, 10 bravery and 5 wounds. Okay, so his melee weapons, so he's got the option of 2. So the first one is the baleful tomb blade, so it's got a range of 1, it's got 4 attacks, freeze the hit, freeze the wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. So not as good as the Black Axe or the previous White King, but you'll see why he's a bit more supportive than offensive. Okay, and then there's other attack, which is the Skeletal Steed's Hooves and Teeth, which is 2 attacks, force the hit, 5 to wound, no rend, 1 damage. And you might be thinking, hang on, where's his horse? In the picture shown, he's just on foot. Now that's how the model comes, but you do have the option to give him a steed, and it doesn't cost any additional points. So I highly recommend you do this, as there's no reason why you shouldn't. Okay, so the description. A White King is a single model bearing a baleful tomb blade. Many White Kings bear an ancient shield to batter aside the enemy's blows, but some instead bear an infernal standard. Now we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so the Skeletal Steed. Some White Kings ride a Skeletal Steed. They move 12 inches rather than 4 inches, and their steed attacks with its hooves and teeth. So like I just mentioned, there's no reason why you shouldn't do this. All it means is you have to be a little bit more creative when it comes to doing some kit bashing and some conversions for your model. Okay, so abilities. So, the Infernal Standard. Infernal Standards are saturated with death magic, which can sustain the undead. A White King with an Infernal Standard has the totem keyword. Roll a dice each time a death model from your army is slain within 9 inches of an Infernal Standard. On a 6, the magic of the Infernal Standard sustains that warrior, and the wound that slew him is ignored. In your hero phase, a White King can plant his standard bearer. If he does so, you cannot move him until your next hero phase, but until then the Infernal Standard influence is extended to 18 inches. Okay, so this is pretty damn good. In my opinion, I'd take this guy every time I take skeletons to the game, because I set him up, I move him a little bit, so it's a bit more into closer to the middle of the board, not completely in the middle, and then I plant his banner, because as soon as his banner, or Infernal Standard as it's called, is planted, you have an 18-inch bubble for every time, essentially, one of your... It works for other death units, but a good example is the Deathrattle, because every time one of your models die, you roll a dice, and on a 6, the magic sustained within the totem saves them. So as long as they're within range of him, they get a extra 6-up save against the damage that would have killed them. But in the terms of Skeleton Warriors and Graveguard, which are only 1 wound models, essentially they get an extra 6-up save. So if the enemy is attacking your Skeleton Warriors and they have a rend of -1, your skeletons don't get a normal save. But with this, they will always get a 6-up save. Now, if you synergize this in with, for being a death army, you get an additional 6-up save if you're within 6 inches of a death hero. Now this means that your units, especially the 1 wound ones, are now getting their standard save, a 6-up save, and then an additional 6-up save. So this banner is, I know I've said this word a lot, but it's another amazing. It's not even, it is of course a choice, because the model, again in the picture you can see it comes with a shield and there's no banner to be seen, so you have to be a little bit creative. All I did was put my model on a bigger base, which you would have seen in one of the previous pictures, and gave him a spare Graveguard banner. And that was a nice, simple, easy conversion to do, and now my guy's got an amazing ability, which is a lot better than the standard one, which we'll get to in a minute. Okay, so his next ability is the Beheading Strike. If the wound roll for an attack made with his Baleful Tombblade is a 6 or more, that attack inflicts D3 damage rather than 1, which you've got to hit, and then you've got a 1 in 6 chance of doing it. Doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, it's a very nice damage increase, because without it, his damage output is really not very good at all. You know, it's almost the same as 2 Graveguard models, which for a hero is not great. But anyway, so after that is the last one, which is the Ancient Shield. A White King with an Ancient Shield has a save of a 3+. Now, yeah, that's good. Having a 3+ save on a hero is fantastic, but compared to you can't take the Infernal Standard if you take the shields, I'll take the Infernal Standard every single time, because the shield is, yeah, it's nice, but the Infernal Standard, given everything within 18 inches if it's planted, the 6-up death save if the model is about to be slain, is insanely good. And also the White King might not have a 3+ save, but for the damage that is about to kill him, his banner's planted, so he's in range of himself, so he also gets that save. So this is why I said he's an amazing support piece for a Deathrattle army, or most death armies to be honest, because of his banner. And because it's 18 inches, it means that you can set him not too far in your backfield, in your territory, but quite far back, and you can have the banner planted, and it can buff quite a lot of the board, because again, it's for, I believe it's for units within the range. Let me just have a look. If I understand it. Oh, sorry, so it is model within the range, but 18 inches is still a large amount of range, and while you're trying to get them into position, it has a 9-inch range, which is very nice, because a lot of these banners that need to be planted don't have any effect unless they are planted, so he can still move, and he's got a 9-inch range. And this is also why you give him the Skeletal Steed, so instead of him moving 4 inches, he's moving 12 inches, so he can get to where he needs to turn 1, and then the next turn he plants the banner, and he doesn't need to move again for the rest of the game, generally. Okay, and then his command ability, it's the same as the last White King, so you pick one of your Deathrattle units within 18 inches and makes an extra attack. I've already explained why this is amazing, especially when you put on the Scaring Warriors, and They can do horrendous things, and a lot of the time, like I was saying, your opponent does not expect it, and they will go into the combat with the Skeleton Warriors being underestimated, shall we say, of the Skeleton Warriors' abilities. So yeah, a lovely command ability. To be honest, it almost looks not as good compared to the Infernal Standard ability, but of course he gets both. So he adds so much to your army. I would say this one is, if you can tell, is my personal favourite out of the two. And if you're taking Deathrattle, I would highly suggest taking both of them, having more of a combat hero and then having more of a supportive one. But if you're forced to only take one, definitely take the White King with the Infernal Standard every time. And that is all the units in the Deathrattle army. This is the longest video I've ever done by a mile, and so please let me know if you prefer the longer videos or the shorter videos. I very much enjoyed making this, as I love the lore of each unit and just Death in general, and I hope I've given some advice on how you plan to take the units and the ways you want to set them up, and how you want to build the army really. I might do an additional video about army building for Deathrattle, but as this is my third video now on Deathrattle, and I have given some advice onto army making in this video, I probably will be moving on to another faction, and like I said, a smaller one. Might be looking at Deadwalkers, because again, there's I don't think there's really any content, especially on like YouTube, regarding Deadwalkers in game. There might be a couple of lore ones out there, so I have some great other channels out there. But yes, so all the rambling on aside, I hope very much you enjoy this video. So please like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. So until next time, remember, Nagash is all, and always one in Nagash. Farewell.